Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Gruesome and Grotesque video. As always, I just do these videos randomly whenever I come across either an article or read something somewhere that I feel should fall within this particular playlist. In this case, it was actually a comment that someone had posted on my recent yogurt shop murders video, and in there they stated that there was a similar set of murders that occurred back in 1990 that are eerily similar to the yogurt shop murders. And what I mean is that the assailants are completely unknown. In other words, to this day, there's no conviction, nobody found guilty, nothing. The people there were shot as well, the poor victims, and the place was actually set on fire too, and it all originated from a robbery. So all those key points were, again, very eerily similar to the 1991 yogurt shop murders. But in this case, what I'm going to talk about here is a very tragic situation. It occurred there in Las Cruces, New Mexico, and it's known as the Cruces Bowling Alley Massacre. Already when you hear a term like that, massacre, you just know it's going to be very sad news all around. But let's go ahead and let's talk about all the information here and focus on some of the main points, and then see, who knows, maybe one day there will actually be something solved for this massacre. So here's essentially what occurred. You have to go back to February 10th, 1990. Again, very similar to the yogurt shop murders, because that one actually just occurred 30 years ago. This one is 1 year older than that. It was there at Las Cruces, New Mexico, specifically in a bowling alley that was known as the Las Cruces Bowl, there on 1201 East Amador Avenue. Some of you that happen to grow up there in Las Cruces, New Mexico during that time, let me know if you are familiar with this place. Maybe if it even is still there to this day. It's doubtful, but again, I would love to hear what some locals have to say about it. But on that fateful morning, here's what occurred. Before the business was going to open, inside that location was the bowling alley's manager, a woman by the name of Stephanie C. Senek. And she had her 12-year-old daughter with her, a girl by the name of Melissa Rapace, and then also a 13-year-old friend named Amy Hauser. So they were there just in the morning preparing to open things. I imagine the little girls there just on the side waiting or doing something else. Interestingly enough, there was actually a daycare within the bowling alley. I've never heard of that before. Someone, again, that's local might have to let me know with regards to that. Is the daycare more for the employees there or for customers? I guess as a way to try to attract business. But they were there just minding their own business. And then there was also one other person within that bowling alley that morning. It was the cook by the name of Ida Hoagland. So everything started with this. Somewhere in the back area, in the kitchen, there was an unlocked door, and someone, one of the assailants, figured that out and was able to go in to the bowling alley through that unlocked door. And when that happened, they actually pulled a pistol on the cook and then ordered that cook to go into the manager's office. This tells me there may be a chance that the assailant here knew information about the inside of the bowling alley. Like maybe they had some knowledge from before. They knew the layouts. They knew exactly where the kitchen was. They knew exactly where the door was, a chance for it to be unlocked. It just seemed too much of a coincidence to be random, at least when I was reading that information. But in any case, the cook was taken there. Obviously, there was the manager with the two kids there, and then the assailant met the other assailant also there as well. They were already together at that point, and they were both holding the hostages with a gun. So in other words, they were holding them at threat with the gun itself. And then while this was happening, the idea was that they were going to rob a safe. Somehow they knew that the safe was right there as well in the in the manager's office. Some of this, I think, is again too much of it to be coincidence. Some of it might actually be just pure luck. Somebody, in other words, going straight into the bowling alley using just logistics to realize there's going to be a safe there's going to be there in the manager's office, and so that's where they went. But in any case, there's just another angle. But yes, as this was happening, they were going to rob the place, and then approximately $4,000 to $5,000 was in that safe at that time. I'm still thinking that this is too much of a coincidence too, because someone would have known that there was a lot of money within that particular safe. Remember, this is 1990. $4,000 to $5,000 would have still been a very good amount of money at that point. Maybe this was the day before a bank run. Maybe this was a day that a cash shipment came in. Who knows? But I still think that's too much of a coincidence there. And then lo and behold, as this was happening, like in other words, the hostages were there in the manager's office, the two gunmen were there as well. All of a sudden, the 26-year-old pin mechanic known as Steve, his name was Steve Tehran, came in, and he in turn saw the place was empty, was trying to find out, what was happening, where was everybody, and so he was there walking in, unfortunately, tragically, with his two daughters, a 2-year-old by the name of Valerie Tehran, and then a 6-year-old by the name of Paula Hogan. And so he wanted to drop them off there in the daycare, but again, not finding anybody around that location, he went to the next step, which was to try to find the manager, Stephanie, in the office. Once that happened, here's where things took a horrible, absolutely horrible turn. Here's what I think happened too, my opinion at least, with what occurred to this. Once he opened up that door, let's say the door was locked into the manager's office, and then boom, all of a sudden he sees what's happening right there. He sees the hostages there. He sees the two gunmen. Maybe at that point, besides, holding them hostage with guns, they are opening up the safe and taking out all the cash. Right at that fateful moment, that's when he pops in, and then that's when I believe these gunmen panicked. That's when they realized this just suddenly went to a whole other point. Maybe it was a situation too where Steve, once he walked in, he was at that vantage point where he was still at the door. If he ran, he would have had the most possibility of escaping. Not that I'm saying that he would have, obviously, like leaving his two daughters there and so on. No, I'm thinking that, like, they're thinking that, not that he would actually in himself run, but more than lines that they're thinking he would. So they had to act fast. And the way it goes is once that happened, he stumbled right into that scene. That's when all of a sudden the shooting started. That's when these two unknown gunmen decided at point blank range to just shoot everyone there. The manager, all the kids, the cook, the pin mechanic, everyone. Everyone was just shot right there at point blank range. Again, eerily similar to what was happening with, or was theorized with, the 1991 yogurt shop murders. In that scenario, it was theorized by police that the assailants were there originally to rob the actual location itself. But there, somewhere along the way, they realized either there's going to be too many witnesses or something else happened that caused them to suddenly shoot the other people that were there, the 4 young girls, and then, of course, set them on fire and so on. That's something similar in this situation here. There was one single point that caused them to do this, and when that happened, everyone was again horribly, just tragically shot. Once they were down on the ground, and some of them were dead, some of them still alive, they decided to set the place on fire, these assailants, probably to try to get rid of evidence, to try to make sure that it could throw law enforcement off, especially with people coming in, like the firefighters and so on. They'd be too busy there trying to put out this fire at the bowling alley, and then instead that would allow them to leave and escape. And that's what happened. They ignited these papers, they ran off. I don't know if they took the money with them, presumably so, but either way though, somebody might have to fill me in with that information. And then that was it. Once they left, they were gone. They were gone pretty much from the face of the earth. No other witnesses could see where they went in terms of their location, who they were, surveillance cameras, nothing along those lines. In fact, there was the fire reported at around 8:33 a.m. And when the firefighters and police officers came, that's when they saw the gruesome situation there. Amy Hauser, Paula Hogan, and Stephen Tehran all had died there. But as a strange but somewhat, hopeful twist, Valerie was rushed to the hospital, but she ended up dying right there. And there was another person, Rapace. She was actually the daughter, Melissa Rapace, of Stephanie Senek. She ended up surviving. Even though she was shot 5 actual times, again at point blank range, she was able to scramble around and get somewhere to a phone, call 911, and then this allowed the emergency responders to arrive much quicker than they would have if, let's say, that phone call wasn't made. So even though there was some sort of a mini miracle with Valerie Turan trying to be rushed to the hospital, she was declared dead afterward. At least in this case, Melissa Rapace was able to survive, and she in turn was able to save the life of her mother and also the cook, Ida Huggins, all because of her miraculous call. Unfortunately, though, the mother ended up dying later on in 1999, so about 9 years later, because of the injuries that were still lifelong injuries from this fire and from being shot. So she was later included as another victim of this tragedy. So horrible, horrible stuff, right? This is just the worst situation possible. What started off as a robbery suddenly ended up being a full-on murder, or as a massacre, as the title shows. And then once that happened, not only that, but these sick perpetrators just decided to set everything on fire just to make sure that they could get rid of the evidence. And even though cops were able to at least try to do something, like in terms of getting a roadblocks surrounding the location, surrounding Las Cruces. I imagine that at Las Cruces at the time, and someone fill me in on this, there's probably very few roads going in and out, right? It seems like another one of those towns that may have a population but not quite as large, and so at certain points there's only going to be a certain number of roads that go in and out, and the drivers were screened. But no, nothing could be done in terms of what happened to these assailants, these two assailants. At the very least, it's been determined that it's two of them. And as you've seen, some witnesses were able to state that these could be, the drawings or some other type of identity associated with the assailants. Even then, there were many other departments that were involved in this hunt. You could just imagine that at that time. And again, someone there local, please fill me in, but you could imagine that how big this news was. I mean, it drew everybody. The Army was brought in, Border Patrol was brought in, Customs Service was brought in too. Obviously, a lot of policemen were there, but nothing was occurred. Nothing was solved. And to this very day, the entire criminal act, this massacre, still remains unsolved, but with consideration of an active investigation. So who knows, maybe to this day, something could be found, because there's a DNA profile that's trying to be built on these assailants. And maybe one day there will be that genealogy, that link that associates some family member of the assailants that eventually leads that trail to the assailants themselves. But until that happens, to this very day, even now past the 30th year that this occurred, it still remains 100% unsolved. And interestingly enough, even though this has been featured on some of the most prominent shows that have captured criminals like Unsolved Mysteries and America's Most Wanted, still these assailants have basically eluded everything. Whatever they did, they were able to do so either by pure happen chance, pure luck, like when it comes to being away from all the witnesses and cameras needed. But whatever they did, it allowed them to be able to disappear into that day and then never ever be seen again. 30 years later, still unsolved, but we shall see later on. But if anybody has any more info, anything else I might have missed with regards to this massacre, then please post those comments below. And again, those of you there on Las Cruces that grew up around that time period, I'd like to hear what your thoughts are with regards to this. Much like with the yogurt shop murders, like I mentioned in my past videos, how that impacted the Austin area. I'd like to hear what your thoughts were, those of you that are growing up locally there. So, all right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care.